He knows who built Stonehenge. He even knows their names. He swam with the Loch Ness Monster, danced with Bigfoot in the rain. Now you may say, who is this man? It's the great Danny Sheridan. He knows where Hoffa's buried.
All right, welcome back in to Smoke on the Water. Let's go straight to the guest line. Let's bring in that great Danny Sheridan. Danny, how we doing tonight? Hope things are well in your world.
I'm doing great. I appreciate you playing part of that song, but I'm kind of hurt you didn't play the one, the professional LA song. That was a better song than the one you just did. But either way, very flattering.
Guess
I wouldn't waste
next
5
time.
seconds on myself.
Well, Danny, you're still, raking in royalties every second that each one's, played. So wanted to help you out a little bit. You're helping us tonight. Thank you for joining us, Danny.
Yeah,
Thanks for having me on.
All right. Well, let's start here locally with Clemson. We are the flagship station of Clemson athletics. We're roughly, depending on which team it is, we're 1/3 or 1/4 through the regular season. Where does Clemson stand with this game Thursday night at NC State? And maybe where do they stand right now in your odds for progressing as the season? I don't want to mention that final game of the year, but you know what I mean as far as them progressing through the regular season is concerned.
Well, first the game this week, or Thursday night. Dave Doran, he's one of my favorite coaches when he was at Northern Illinois. He will definitely have them ready. It's been an interesting series. I remember last year I got lucky. I don't know how I won. Picked North Carolina State plus 15, and as you know, and your listeners know, I think it was, 62-48, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Clemson beat North Carolina State.
Yeah, the game just ended about 20 minutes ago.
That's correct.
It kept going.
It's for some reason, Clemson usually doesn't take them. They take them very lightly. In 2011, I remember Clemson upset them, beat them pretty badly. And then, North Carolina State upset Clemson in 11. And then Clemson barely beat them in 10. But it's a game where, Clemson's not looking ahead to Wake Forest, their homecoming game. And I'd be very surprised if Clemson, of course, didn't win, but to think it'll be a cakewalk, I don't know. I just don't think they'll be motivated for the game. As far as overall preseason, I said, and I may have said it with Price, I don't remember, but ACC, Clemson, and Florida State, those are two battle-tested SEC teams. In other words, they could compete in the SEC. They're really good programs. Florida State has a 3-game schedule. That's at Clemson, where the game should be pick-em, maybe either side 1 point. At home against Miami, they'll be an 8-point favorite and a slight underdog. Might be a 1-point favorite at Florida, where they've had a lot of luck. Clemson, I said, had a 3-game schedule. Georgia, which of course they won. Florida State, let's just call it an even game. You get them both at home, and then they've lost 4 in a row to South Carolina, which is no disgrace. South Carolina's won 11 games 2 years in a row. So overall, that's their big obstacle. Any other team, well, they may play close with a North Carolina State or somebody like that. It's only because they're not interested. Talent level, coaching level, Clemson is superior to every team in the ACC except Florida State. Very hard for me to separate them. And if Florida State were to play Clemson at Florida State, and this may surprise you, the game would be Pick'em and Clemson. Florida State would be about a 7-point favorite. Not because Clemson's not any good. It's just the betting line is the public's perception of how two teams match up, and people are really high on Florida State, and they have probably one of the highest home field point spread advantages in college football.
Well, Danny, you kind of touched on it right there. Going into the season, you said with us, preseason, that these were obviously the two battle-tested teams. You just said it right now. What is Jameis Winston, the great freshman quarterback, and I got to qualify great because he's only played a couple games for Florida State. What is Winston, what you've seen out of him in just a couple games, has that changed the way you think of this Florida State team right now?
No, I knew. Well, let me say this. I knew. Alabama wanted him badly. Several schools wanted him. There's reports out there that Texas didn't talk to him. Texas didn't recruit him because they knew they weren't going to get him. And when you have all these schools interested in a quarterback, plus I saw him, or I know of him playing in Alabama, this kid is very good. I know he's going to be a great quarterback. I didn't know how well he would adapt to the system as a freshman, but there's no surprise here. He's a gifted athlete. He's in my Heisman Trophy candidate list, and I think he's well deserving. He was not in the list when the season started, but there's no surprise. I like Boyd because obviously a veteran, senior, and but Boyd was not this good as a freshman. I promise you that. I don't know if anybody, maybe Manziel was. Manziel would have been better as a freshman, I think, than him right now.
Well, let's move to the high. Yeah, let's Danny. Speaking of Heisman, and let's go ahead and go there right now because I know you've got some updated Heisman odds. You know, after you've seen a couple weeks of the season unfold, but especially I got to think that your rankings or your odds may have changed a little bit after that Manziel performance. I keep going back to the quote you gave to your buddy Paul Feinbaum. Said you guys had a better chance of having a 5-star meal on Mars tonight than Manziel making it to the Heisman finals.
Well,
what did that do?
You got everything right, except you insulted me by calling him my buddy. He's a necessary that I have to deal with. But that's go ahead.
Go ahead, Danny. Yeah, talk to us about the Heisman.
The only two changes I've made, and that's a very good point, was Manziel, which I did Monday. I haven't released him, but I will do so now. But I did put Manziel back in the group, and adding Winston, Jameis Winston, to the mix. I have him way up there. But basically, Bridgewater and Marcus Mariota, I have him both of them at 5-1 as the co-favorites. No surprise there. I have Winston and Aaron Murray, Georgia quarterback, at 6-1. I think that's a good choice. Anthony Thomas, the great running back of Oregon, I have him at 8-1. I have Boyd. I moved him up a little with T.J. Yeldon in Alabama at 10-1. Then the Ohio State quarterback Braxton Miller. He's been injured, but they have a joke of a schedule. And then I moved Manziel in, tied with him, Miller, about 12-1. Brett Hundley and A.J. McCarron would be at 20-1. That's not a knock on McCarron, but that's realistic. But there's no way that Manziel is going to win the Heisman because it's very political. And even if he had beaten Alabama, that just gets him an invitation. The Heisman people are real snotty, again, very political. They saw how a freshman embarrassed him. What would he do in their mind? I don't think this is fair because he is the best player in the country. But what would he do if he's going to turn pro and he won the Heisman the second year in a row? There's no telling what he would do, and that's the thought. So it's unfortunate. Those other guys should definitely be favored over him, and one of them will win the Heisman. He won't.
Now, Danny, when you look across the Lone Star State there, one of the biggest fires going on in college football 1/4 of the way in the season is what's taking place with Texas and Mack Brown. What's your thought on all that? Because the pressure of what Manziel's doing at Texas A&M and the fact that they're now getting a lot of those recruits is starting to change things for Texas. What's that train wreck all about in Austin right now?
Well, first of all, you have to go back to some 15 years ago when Mack took over. Use your word, train wreck would be kind. Texas couldn't raise any money, as wealthy as they are. People were disenchanted, and they will tell you that he resurrected the program. I think he only won like 10 games, 9 straight years in a row. But unfortunately, it's what have you done for me lately? You make the correct point. If A&M were losing, he wouldn't be catching half this heat, probably not even 10%. In fairness to Texas, David Ash, their quarterback, who they're resting the whole season on, he didn't play last week. He was injured. I think he had a concussion against Baylor. And they need Ash to win, but it'll all come down, if he beats Oklahoma, which is not going to be easy, if he beats Oklahoma State, which both of them are possible, and wins the Big 12, all this talk is going to diminish. If he loses to Oklahoma, well, I don't have to tell you what's going to happen, but he's a class guy, and they're going to cut him a lot of slack. The fans won't, social media won't, but Texas will because they have a debt to him. It's sort of like Bobby Bowden. Did he put Florida State on the map or what? And what they did to him the last year was unconscionable. They should have let him coach another year. They should have given him a nice buyout, but that's another story. Texas won't do that. If they decide to make a move, I promise you, Mack Brown, classy guy. I've never ran into anybody that said he wasn't a classy guy. He'll step down, and he'll be rewarded handsomely. Handsomely to me is $7.5 to $10 million buyout.
Danny, we talked about the ACC a little bit. Let's look at the SEC and, the odds where you have it kind of moving forward after 3 weekends of football. I mean, obviously everybody in the country knew what Alabama had, that they were the favorite. I believe you had 3-1 for Georgia and South Carolina to win the East. Obviously, those two teams that played, I think you ultimately, I think if I remember right, had South Carolina advance into Atlanta to play Nick Saban and the Crimson Tide.
Yes,
where does that stand?
South Carolina, Florida, which I think will be South Carolina. I picked them to be in the East against Alabama, and I still think that's a real strong possibility. I think Georgia's going to definitely lose to Florida, and I think they'll probably lose to LSU. If that happens in 2 weeks, I promise you, I don't promise you, but as a handicapper, Florida's going to beat Georgia. Is Florida as good as Georgia? Nope, but they will. So I think in the East you could have easily a team with 2 SEC losses. So I think South Carolina's alive. If you talk about odds, of course, Alabama's almost a 3-1 favorite to win the SEC. Georgia would be next at 3-1. I'd have LSU next at about 4-1. Then I'd have a pretty good drop-off. Odds-wise, South Carolina and Ole Miss. And yes, Ole Miss, I know they don't have a chance, but you have to put them at 10-1 until they show you differently. And then Florida 12-1. The team that I should have conspicuously absent would be Texas A&M at 25-1. I don't see them winning the West, and obviously I don't see them winning the SEC. Too much to overcome. They have a very easy schedule, and they have a very good team, but you have to rate Alabama, Georgia, and LSU. So the only team, I think, on your show that could beat Alabama would be an 11 to 13-point underdog if they were playing this weekend, would be LSU, and I still feel that way, though I think Ole Miss can scare them a little. I just don't think they can beat them in Tuscaloosa. But Ole Miss is capable of playing with them because Alabama's secondary, I'm not going to tell you they're weak because they're not weak. They're great athletes, but they haven't learned Saban's system, and he was very upset, understandably. They didn't play like he wanted them to play their position against A&M. Would it have mattered? Might have mattered a little in the score, but that's my take on Alabama, and I know Mississippi can pass on them, and I think Mississippi can play with them. Mississippi's defense, I don't know about that. That's the Achilles heel against a great Alabama team, especially their offensive line, who all the experts were selling them out after the first game because they don't know anything about football. That's another story.
We're talking with the great Danny Sheridan, the oddsmaker and sports columnist for USA Today. And Danny, what now that you've had with some teams 3 weeks, who maybe did you undervalue before the season? Maybe you overvalued because on my end of things, personally, I'm looking at what Cam Cameron's done for Zach Mettenberger, quarterback for LSU, 9 touchdowns, 0 interceptions. And now I realize that I undervalued LSU. Do you feel that way about anybody in particular?
Well, not to brag, I didn't undervalue them because I said they're the second best team. I picked them to be second behind Alabama
you did.
in the West, ahead of A&M, who has A&M is probably a little bit better. But also stated the obvious to the people that I spoke to that the best hire was Cam Cameron, offensive coordinator. And I've been real high on Mettenberger long before he played that great game against Alabama. He's a great athlete, and I think they have a great team. And so when you say who have I undervalued, I'm just looking at the top 10 teams that I picked this preseason and looking at my odds. I don't think I've undervalued, and I'm sure there's someone out there I just can't think of right now. It's only the second or third week of the season. But I don't, unless you told me someone right off the bat, I can't think of anybody that's jumped out there that surprised me. But maybe you'll think of a team, and I'll give you a straight answer. But looking at my top 10 to win the BCS, there are no surprises, unless you consider Miami a surprise. I don't consider them a surprise, but they're not as good as Florida. It's Florida State, the Florida State FSU winner, not Miami. Miami's not. Miami wouldn't beat Florida, wouldn't beat Clemson, and I think they'll play. It'll be really tough to beat to beat Florida State, for Miami to beat them in Tallahassee.
And before we let you go, Danny, but going into the season, you had Alabama, you had Oregon as your 2 top teams in your BCS odds. obviously nothing has changed there. I think as we sit here today, I mean, really there's one realistic roadblock each team has to go through for an undefeated season. So I think it'd be hard to see that change. But if there were one team you think that may be able to crash those odds, so to speak, of Oregon and Alabama meeting in the BCS championship game, who would that one team be?
Well, I stated when I picked Oregon and Alabama to be in the title game, which whether they are or not, I'm not too good. The only reason why I've been lucky in that the last couple of years is because I picked Alabama. Well, hell, I'm a homer. I went to school there, and they know their schedule. And miraculously, Alabama got in the championship game last year. I'm not so sure it wasn't a miracle the year before with those major upsets. But Oregon, I said at the time, they'll be a 3-4 point favorite if they played today at Stanford. I think they'll smoke Stanford. That's the only team that can beat them, and I'd be really surprised. I think Stanford's going to have 3 losses. I know SI picked them to be number 2 or 3 in the country, but I'll be real surprised they don't have 3 losses. They got a good team, but they don't match up with Oregon. Oregon's the only team, I think I said it on your show in preseason, they're the only team that can match up with Alabama right now because they have it on both sides of the ball. And when someone starts telling me, well, they don't play anybody, they're Pac-10, I just want to point out, they played a hell of a game against Auburn. And Cam Newton, no one, including Alabama, could stop Cam Newton. And Cam Newton, as you know, in Auburn upset Alabama at the end of the year. And Oregon lost the game by, 3 on a fluke play to get down there. They didn't tackle Dreyer when they thought he was down. They just let him run for 40 yards. But bottom line is Oregon is another SEC battle-tested team. So I'm not so sure at this stage. Alabama would be favored. But I don't think Alabama has a better team than Oregon right now. I think not because of A&M. Anybody would have a tough time against them out there in that heat yesterday or Saturday. But I'm really impressed with Oregon. I think they're the best team in the country. Best team in the country doesn't always win, but they are.
Well, Danny, thank you for your time tonight. People can follow you on Twitter at Danny Sheridan1. Anything else that you want our listeners to know about with what all you do with Oddsmakers and Columnist and everything else?
I really appreciate that, but that was very kind of you to mention Twitter. I enjoy that and answering, some tweets from people. I'm not above that, and I'm very flattered when they tweet me. I guess that's the term. But, nope, that's it, and just hope I stay lucky picking those point spread winners every week. And I appreciate
all right,
well,
thank you very much for your time, Danny. We appreciate it as always. We'll check in with you later.
Thank you. Talk to you later, Mark.
Thanks, Danny.
Bye.